To open up a subject, to identify a starting point, to find something to write on a blank piece of paper, you need to invoke your intuition. Once you get started, you can then begin to apply rational and logical steps, but reason itself doesn't give you the starting point. It might seem that the obvious rational place to start in offering a rational account of existence is the principle of sufficient reason, PSR. But it's not at all obvious. Science doesn't start with the PSR. Philosophy doesn't start with the PSR. Religion doesn't start with the PSR. Spirituality doesn't start with the PSR. Abstract mathematics doesn't start with the PSR. Only ontological mathematics begins with the PSR. Only ontological mathematics says that the ground of mathematics, the source of mathematics, is the PSR. The PSR, in order to be the basis of ontology, must itself be ontological. It must exist as something. What it exists as is not self-evident. It took the greatest act of intuition in all of history to see that the PSR is the same as the God equation, the generalized version of Euler's formula, and is ontologically conveyed by mathematical monadic minds, each of which is an instantiation of the God equation, aka the soul equation or mind equation. Intuition is critical because we can make no progress without it. It's our in to every subject. Every great system begins with a flash of supreme intuition. Ontological mathematics originated in Pythagoras' statement, all things are numbers. No one could possibly look at the world with their physical senses and reach that conclusion. Scientists cannot accept the ontology of mathematics because 1. They lack intuition, and 2. They are prisoners of what their senses appear to be showing them, phenomena, and have no means to reach the unobservable, noumena, which are paradigmatically excluded from science. Scientists are extremely literal. They are frequently on the autistic spectrum. They can't imagine that things exist which they can't see or observe in some way. Science has waged a constant war against noumena, unobservables, hidden variables, mathematical ontology. Jung wrote, "I have tried to describe that function, intuition, as well as I can, but perhaps it is not very good. I say that intuition is a sort of perception which does not go exactly by the senses, but it goes via the unconscious, and at that I leave it and say, I don't know how it works. I do not know what is happening when a man knows something he definitely should not know. I do not know how he has come by it, but he has it all right and he can act on it. For instance, anticipatory dreams, telepathic phenomena, and all that kind of thing are intuitions. I have seen plenty of them, and I am convinced that they do exist. You can see these things also with primitives. You can see them everywhere if you pay attention to these perceptions that somehow work through the subliminal data, such as sense perceptions so feeble that our consciousness simply cannot take them in. Sometimes, for instance, in cryptomnesia, when a forgotten memory returns without its being recognized as such by the subject, who believes it is something new and original, Wikipedia, something creeps up into consciousness. You catch a word which gives you a suggestion, but it is always something that is unconscious until the moment it appears, and so presents itself as if it had fallen from heaven. The Germans call this an Einfall, which means a thing which falls into your head from nowhere. Sometimes it is like a revelation. Prophets, gurus, shamans, mediums, psychics, clairvoyants, sensitives, channelers, and so on, are all intuitives. The paranormal is all about intuition. The paranormal is dismissed by science because science dismisses intuition and the non-local mind. Science is all about matter, the physical senses, and the local. Everything else is paradigmatically excluded. Sensing types just can't fathom intuition and all the amazing things it makes possible. They are as resistant to the reality of intuition as they are to the reality of mathematics. Jung wrote, "Actually, intuition is a very natural function, a perfectly normal thing, and it is necessary, too, because it makes up for what you cannot perceive or think or feel because it lacks reality. Intuition isn't about unreality. It's about accessing reality through unconventional means so wondrous that science dismisses their existence. They seem to belong more to the world of magic. The magic world is in fact simply the intuitive, non-local world of the unconscious mind. Intuition is the greatest gift of the unconscious. With intuition, no one consciously works out anything. Rather, the unconscious works it out, without the person's awareness. It is then presented to consciousness as a fait accompli. Consciousness has no idea how the result was produced. It knows nothing about it. However, when it is presented with this gift from the unconscious, it can then seize on it and do amazing conscious things with it. Jung wrote, "You see, the past is not real anymore and the future is not as real as we think. Therefore we must be very grateful to heaven that we have such a function which gives us a certain light on those things which are round the corners." Doctors, of course, being often presented with the most unheard of situations, need intuition a great deal. Many a good diagnosis comes from this, very mysterious, function. Intuition can reflect on the past and see where things came from, and this allows it to see where things are going. The intuitive person is invariably seized by future possibilities, or by a lightning understanding of the past, explaining an event in the present. Where sensing types are mentally stuck in the moment, intuitives are always mentally in the future, which may involve having a great understanding of the past in order to be able to project how it will affect the future. That's why they're progressives rather than regressives. Intuition concerns the non-local, so it dispenses with immediate space, with the local. It's because intuition is so concerned with future possibilities and non-local connections between present things that science cannot come to terms with it and basically denies the existence of intuition. Ontological mathematics begins with intuitions, which are then developed discursively via rational and logical deduction. Once a sufficiently large deductive system exists, there's less and less need for intuition as the deduction can then methodically take care of itself. All new paradigms require an intuition to get them going. All paradigm shifts require an intuition that the old system is wrong and the new system right. Science, which is extremely hostile to intuition, is equally hostile to paradigm shifts. It's as entrenched as any religion. Science begins with perceptions and then applies crude induction to these perceptions. Thinking, such as it is in science, is always carried out in the service of perceptions. This means that no purely conceptual thinking, wholly excluding perceptions, can ever take place in science. Such thinking is paradigmatically forbidden. That's why science is opposed to rationalism, logic, conceptualism, nominalism, hidden variables, the ontology of mathematics, and so on. None of these things is observable, so science refuses to countenance any such thing. Science is a system of faith that no such things can be real. Only sensory things can be real, says science. This is somewhat unfortunate for science since it now claims that 95% of the universe is dark, in terms of dark energy and dark matter, and it has no idea what these are. In fact, 100% of reality in itself is dark. It's noumenal, not phenomenal. It has no appearance. It resides in a non-sensory singularity. You can see the phenomenal information carried by existence. You cannot see the noumenal information carrier. You are literally prevented from seeing it because the perceiving functions, whether sensing or intuition, are attuned to the information carried and not the information carrier. Only reason, logic, analysis, conceptualism, nominalism, mathematics, can access the information carrier. These are thinking and judging functions, not perceiving, non-judging, functions. Perceiving types detest judgment and thinking. Science is a quintessentially perceiving subject. Step 1 of its method is to observe the world, i.e., to engage in perceiving and therefore not to engage in thinking and judging, which are ipso facto deemed unreal by science. They are dismissed as man-made abstractions. This is why science can never be a rational, logical, conceptual, intellectual subject. From the get-go, science repudiates all such things. It instantly, in step 1 of its method, privileges perceiving and the human senses over everything else. It instantly denies the reality of anything non-perceptual, and in doing so it instantly denies the ontology of mathematics. Everything about science is captured by step 1 of its method. Right there, You know that science will be anti-intellectual, will not be based on any laws of logic, will reject the principle of sufficient reason and its corollary Occam's razor, will reject concepts, noumena, hidden variables, and so on. All of that is baked into step 1. As soon as a scientist accepts step 1, they are locked into a sensory paradigm, a faith in the power of perceiving, and a rejection of the power of reason and logic, which are not perceiving functions. There is no bigger mystery than that scientists claim to be rational and logical while rejecting reason and logic. They reject the ontology, the reality, of mathematics, even though 100% of serious science is framed mathematically in all of its models, descriptions and definitions of reality. There is not a single intellectual, there never has been and there never will be, who would accept the involvement of something declared a mere, unreal, man-made abstraction in any treatment of reality. Yet scientists don't care that their system is based on a category error, i.e., that it is permissible to use unreality to describe reality, to use non-scientific mathematics to power the whole of science, and this is because scientists are foundationally anti-intellectual with no interest in the coherence of science. They frequently state how much they reject philosophy, a statement that only an unapologetic anti-intellectual would make. Of course, science nowadays believes that existence is random, meaningless, purposeless and pointless, so why would it have any respect for grand philosophy, which concerns the eternal and necessary, meaning, purpose and the absolute point of everything? Step 1 of the scientific method basically states that science has no interest in big questions and big answers. Science's agenda is a stunningly limited one: to accept as real only what appears to human observation and the mechanical extensions thereof, and to reject everything else. Since the answer to existence and therefore the meaning, purpose and point of existence do not present themselves to the human senses, science can by definition never have any concern with these things. It can only ever be about process, about how, and can never touch on ultimate reasons and explanations. i.e., why. Science is a subject inherently hostile to philosophy, which is to say to intellectualism. No scientist is ever occupied with the big questions since these are all excluded by its paradigm. They are ruled out by step 1 of science's method, the step in which its anti-intellectual ideology is laid bare. In step 1, science commits itself to addressing only what can be observed. Since nothing that counts, meaning, purpose, point, source, mind, thought, reason, logic, concept, consciousness, the unconscious, subjectivity, free will, intellectualism, the eternal and necessary, the analytic a priori, and even foundational life itself, can ever be observed by the human senses, these cannot exist for science, which is exactly why science can say nothing about them, and has to dismiss them as unreal, illusion, epiphenomenon, emergent property, accident, chance phenomenon, and so on. Science engages in an intellectual fraud known as promissory materialism. Sir John C. Eccles wrote, "I maintain that the human mystery is incredibly demeaned by scientific reductionism, with its claim in promissory materialism to account eventually for all of the spiritual world in terms of patterns of neuronal activity. This belief must be classed as a superstition. We have to recognize that we are spiritual beings with souls existing in a spiritual world as well as material beings with bodies and brains existing in a material world." David Sweet wrote, "Materialism operates on the assumption that if a materialistic explanation is not available, it will be forthcoming, because, simply put, materialism is true. Thus, voila, there are no more mysteries. That was easy." Mary Midgley wrote, "This whole reductive program, this mindless materialism, this belief in something called matter as the answer to all questions, is not really science at all. It is, and always has been, just an image, a myth, a vision, an enormous act of faith." As Karl Popper said, it is promissory materialism, an offer of future explanations based on boundless confidence in physical methods of inquiry. It is a quite general belief in matter, which is conceived in a new way as able to answer all possible questions. And that belief has flowed much more from the past glories of science than from any suitability for the job in hand. In reality, not all questions are physical questions or can be usefully fitted to physical answers. Mark Vernon wrote, "But when Colin Blakemore proposes that life, consciousness and religion all lie within the grasp of that worldview, materialism, he is writing what the philosopher of science, Karl Popper, called a promissory note. That note says, "Commit to my materialist conception of the universe and everything will become clear. Not yet, maybe not next year, but surely the time will come." Like the Christian second coming, science's promissory note is never delivered on, and, like the second coming, it will never be delivered, yet science's believers go on believing, just as Christian believers go on believing. It is impossible for science to explain existence. That is made clear in step 1 of its method, where it bases its conception of reality on whatever is available to the limited, delusional, unreliable, fallible human senses, which can only ever detect the appearance of things and never their intelligible essence. Science can never get behind appearances to the core of things. It can never reach metaphysics, that which lies beyond physics and explains physics, so it simply dismisses metaphysics as yet another illusion. It's breathtaking how nihilistic and anti-intellectual science is. It's the opposite of Platonism, which asserted that only the intelligible order is real, while the sensible order is a deceptive simulacrum. Science believes in the reality of the simulacrum and the unreality of reality. Never forget that science became successful at a very precise point, when it embraced mathematics, which it claims is an unreal abstraction. Ask yourself this: how could science ever go about proving that reality is not mathematical? Mathematics is beyond the scientific paradigm, just as metaphysics is. Science can say nothing about anything outside its paradigm.